Good morning, I'm Maiki Oreta, and you're watching Business 360, where we break down the numbers, connect the dots, and give you the developments and the insights you need to navigate, adapt, and lead. Let's dive right in. In a powerful show of unity, more than 24 of the country's biggest business groups are calling on President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. to act swiftly and decisively on the flood control corruption scandal. A lawmaker urges President Marcos to reconsider the e-visa system for Chinese tourists, warning it could compromise national security. And in France, authorities are investigating a daring heist at the world-famous Louvre Museum. First, let's take a look at how global financial markets performed last Friday. Wall Street ended higher as investors weighed U.S. President Donald Trump's latest remarks on China and strong earnings from regional banks ease fears over credit risks. Trump said his proposed 100% tariff on Chinese goods would not be sustainable, but blamed Beijing for the latest stalemate in trade talks after China tightened control over rare earth exports. Regional bank stocks rebounded after a sharp sell-off on Thursday, with Zions Bank Corporation disclosing losses on 2 commercial loans, while Western Alliance filed a lawsuit alleging fraud by Cantor Group.
The markets responded favorably to Powell's comments that were largely seen as dovish, kind of confirming rate cuts. I think what's unexpected is, the emergence of these kind of bigger defaults on the subprime side, and could that spread into broader contagion?
The Dow Jones, the S&P 500, and the Nasdaq all rose by 0.5%. Over in Europe, markets closed lower. London's FTSE dropped 0.9%. Germany's DAX fell almost 2%, and France's CAC 40 down by 0.2%. Here at home, banks continue to power our economy as industry assets hit new highs amid strong lending and investment growth. Philippine bank assets grew by 6.7% in August, reaching 27.73 trillion according to the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. This was higher than last year's 25.99 trillion pesos. The increase was driven mainly by a rise in investments and loans, with the total loan portfolio jumping nearly 10% year-on-year. Net investments also climbed over 10%, while bank capital accounts grew to 3.56 trillion pesos. Meanwhile, derivatives for hedging and unsecured subordinated debt both saw sharp declines. Economists say growth could moderate in the coming months as the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas continues to ease monetary policy. The Senate is taking a hard stand on budget transparency, vowing to block billions in lump sum funds tucked into next year's national budget. Senate President Tito Soto says that the upper chamber will not allow unprogrammed appropriations to slip through unchecked. This after House Speaker Faustino D. III confirmed that the House-approved 2026 budget contains 80 billion pesos in unprogrammed funds. Soto says that the Senate is now reviewing reports that the true figure could be as high as 200 billion pesos. He adds that he plans to speak directly with D, stressing that every peso must be fully accounted for, unlike in the previous years. In a rare and powerful show of unity, more than 30 of the country's biggest business organizations, including the Philippine Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the Management Association of the Philippines, the Makati Business Club, the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines, and the Philippine Exporters Confederation, have just released a joint statement urging President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. to take decisive action against what they're calling a historic and unprecedented corruption scandal in flood control and infrastructure projects. The groups warn that corruption has real fiscal costs, that the projects may be fake, but the debt is real. They're calling on the president to empower the Independent Commission on Infrastructure, or the ICI, with full legal authority to conduct a swift investigation. They also want all those responsible prosecuted. The business groups also urge Marcos to implement institutional reforms and to ensure the restitution of ill-gotten wealth and embezzled funds of the government. They also want regular public updates on the progress of the investigations. They say taxpayers will ultimately foot the bill, and the scandal has eroded public trust and now threatens national security. The Makati Business Club says that the flood control corruption scandal is also threatening investor confidence. On BNC's At the Forefront, Executive Director Apa Ongpin said their message to President Marcos is to restore public trust and encourage domestic investments.
One of the things that we've been saying in the last few months is everybody's focused on foreign direct investment, as if there's like this huge, pool of foreign direct investment that's clamoring to get into the Philippines. That's not the case. We should be looking at domestic investment, right? I mean, domestic businesses, why are they not investing more in the economy, in risking their money for greater growth, right? And I think that's really the question we need to ask. Corruption is a big factor in.
That call for action has sent ripple effects across the business sector. To help us break down what this means and what comes next, we're joined by EJ Kwahian Sen, President of the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines, or FINEX. Hi, EJ. Good to have you with us.
Hi, good morning, Maiki.
EJ, this is an economic issue, and this joint statement was initiated by the PCCI. What pushed all of you to join this?
I think the unity really shows the scale of the problem. Corruption isn't something that impacts just one business, one sector, one person. It's pervasive and affects all of us. If you trace it back, actually, the conversations really started at the beginning of this year. For us personally at FINEX, it started at our induction when Ramon Del Rosario Jr. really started bringing up the anomalies in the budget. And since then, the business groups have kept that momentum going, discussing it and bringing issues to light and making the recommendations. And I think this one in particular, we're entering 2026. We still have time to correct the 2026 national budget. So we have to act urgently to make sure it's done properly.
Yeah, we just got off FATFA's gray list. We don't want to go back in
Exactly.
there.
Exactly.
Corruption is, as we've seen, it's deep and it's pervasive. And the flood control scandal is just the latest symptom. EJ, what kind of damage are you seeing on the on investor confidence and on fiscal discipline as a result of this?
Sure. I think when we talk about investor confidence, at least the current commitments are being honored. We can't yet see the impact on future investors. Although, again, as you mentioned, we did just get off the FATFA list. We don't want to go back on. Going back on it would certainly dampen investor confidence. I think when we talk fiscal discipline, though, obviously there's a delay in government spending as a result of these. As we look at the projects more in detail to see if they're real and they will actually return value, that will have a slowdown effect on economic growth.
Yeah, we need projects that return value. When we talk about fiscal discipline, there's the interest and there's the principal that we're paying. Can you share with us your perspective on how things look? We've borrowed about $1.5 trillion additional last year. How is this deterring future investments?
Sure. If you look over the last 10 years, our national debt has grown by about 10 trillion pesos, right? That's real debt that we take on. For the 10 trillion pesos, the last time the government issued 5-year debt, it was about 5.8%. So let's just say for every trillion pesos, we're going to end up paying 58 billion a year in interest expense. And at some point, we have to pay off that principal again or reborrow, which is what we've been doing recently. At some point, if these investments that the government's making don't pay back, we might not be able to pay that off. Right now, the Philippines is in good fiscal shape. The governments have done a good job of bringing that in and improving our balance sheet. But again, if we're not investing prudently, creating projects of real value or real projects, the debt is real. Right? And at some point, we're going to have to pay the bill.
That's right. The projects may be ghost, but the debt is real.
Exactly.
EJ, do you think the president is going to respond to this plea? And what would you like to see between now and perhaps by the end of the year, December?
Well, he definitely has to respond. Again, this is an issue of national importance. You can see that the people really are demanding for accountability and are demanding for transparency. So what we'd like to see going into next year, of course, one is we need and want a transparent budget, both in how it's prepared, where people can participate, and then transparency in how it's allocated and subsequently dispersed to make sure that the funds, again, are going to the right projects that have been identified. Secondly, going back to accountability, people really need to be charged and tried to the full extent of the law for all of these things that have happened. It's blown up over the last few months, and we still haven't seen people charged. We've seen investigations, discussions, but there hasn't yet been that accountability on the level of
this
perpetrators.
Blew up in September. It's mid-October now. But we've established the ICI, but also we have the Ombudsman and we have the COA. We want to see, I guess what people are saying is they want to see real teeth. Taking a look at the fiscal outlook and the risks of this crisis, we have a proposed 6.8 trillion budget for 2026. 950 billion of that is going to go to interest payments, 1 trillion for principal amortization. That's nearly 2 trillion just to pay off past debt. Our debt to GDP ratio at present is where it's not comfortable. It's not great. It's not too bad. We're at about 60%, whereas for developing countries that should be at about 70. So we're okay. But what about our ability to repay, the ability of future generations to repay, if not our generation? It's going to be for the kids. What are your thoughts on this, EJ?
I think we have to look beyond the debt to GDP number, right? The debt to GDP number shows how much we can borrow. But what's really more important to us and to future generations is how much can we repay, right? So again, going back to what I was saying earlier, can we pay off that interest payment every year? Can we pay off that principal when it's due? Or will we have the ability to refinance and borrow again down the road? The more that we pay in interest expense, the more we pay in principal payments, the less we can use to actually strengthen our country.
Right. The less ammunition we have to work with.
Exactly.
We're paying so much debt, and that debt, if that's just financing corruption. Lastly, I wanted to ask you, EJ, how will Finex sustain this momentum? How are you going to make sure that we see traction from Malacanang?
Sure. We're going to continue to hold our government accountable. We're going to continue to hold discussions and be a platform to bring about dialogue and data, so that we can continue to make recommendations on how the budget will be allocated and how it will be dispersed. Finex is an organization, I always say, we're one of the most empathetic to the challenges of developing a budget and then also making sure it's done properly.
Yeah, we need to make sure it's done properly. 2025, that's over and done with. Focus now on 2026 and making sure that it's clean and put where it needs to be. EJ, thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Thank you, Maiki.
We're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and the narratives that matter most, your bottom line. Welcome back. Let's check on how Asian markets are doing this Monday morning. Right now, the Nikkei 225 is in the green, up sharply, up by almost 3%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index up sharply as well, up by nearly 2%. Shanghai's Composite up by 0.6%, and Singapore's Straits Times Index going the other way, lower by 0.6%. Here at home, the local market ended flat Friday as investors remain cautious ahead of earnings reports and global trade developments. The main index slipped by less than 0.1% to close at 60.90, marking its second straight day of sideways movement. Volume was very light at 4.4 billion pesos. Analysts say investors are staying on the sidelines, awaiting stronger corporate earnings and clearer policy signals amid continued uncertainty in the global economy. For now, the market remains in consolidation mode as traders look for cues that could lift sentiment in the days ahead. Taking a look at the main gauge right now, as of 10:15, we are trading flat with a very, very slight upward bias at 60.90. All shares index, all shares index in the red, down by 0.1% to 36.61. Taking a look at the sub-indices, all are trading to the downside, except for the services counter, which is up by 0.7% in early trade. Total volume is at 222 million shares, valued at 502 million pesos. Market breadth is bearish with 66 decliners outpacing 57 advancers and 59 stocks unchanged. Taking a look at the currencies, the peso opened at 58.19 against the greenback, down from its previous close of 58.16. Amid rising tensions with China, a lawmaker is warning Malacanang, don't open the door too wide. A call is growing to scrap the Philippine embassy's plan in Beijing to roll out e-visas for Chinese nationals, citing serious national security risks. The embassy says that the e-visa system would only make travel more convenient. But Cagayan de Oro representative Rufus Rodriguez insists on stricter screening and mandatory personal appearances. He warns that the influx of Chinese visitors has been linked to espionage, kidnapping for ransom, illegal gambling, and other crimes. Rodriguez points to recent arrests of alleged Chinese spies near military camps and the Commission on Elections. He also urged authorities to track down remaining illegal POGO workers still operating in the country. Turning to the markets, Philippine equities remain under pressure and are struggling to find direction. The main gauge is coming off its longest losing streak in months, now trading near year lows as governance concerns and a weaker peso continue to weigh on sentiment. Joining us now is Manny Ocampo, the President and COO of the Investment and Capital Corporation of the Philippines, to talk market confidence, valuations, and the road to 2026. Hi, Mr. Ocampo. Thank you for being here with us.
Manny, please, Maiki.
Okay, all right, Manny. You know, the PSE index, we're hovering at about 6,000. How would you describe sentiment right now? And at this point, are we looking a bit oversold?
You know, sentiment is negative considering everything, which all the speakers, here on your channel spoke about. But yeah, I think, you know, we're at that point where we're getting oversold. You don't see the market getting sold down. It tried a few times already, but there seems to be a base where people are willing to catch it at a certain point.
Yeah, we're now seeing some companies trading lower than their pandemic sell-offs. And these are big names. These are Ayala Corporation, SM, and Aboitiz Equity. There's just a lot of risk aversion. It's local, but it's also global.
Yes.
The U.S. The U.S. is at its longest standing shutdown, and that's creating a lot of uncertainty.
Yes. You know, that's on the politics side in the U.S., but markets in the U.S. are hitting all-time highs, so seems to be going different ways. But, you know, the uncertainty is something that markets don't like. Here at our side, we don't like it, you know, brought about by all of these things about the corruption scandal and, you know, the inaction by the administration or the lack of action by the administration is something people are looking forward to, that, you know, we should take action.
Jumping from there, Manny, you know, it seems like something needs to happen by December. Otherwise, we risk off writing off the first half of 2026. We're seeing DPWH cutting budgets. And the first half of the year, that's when they need to mobilize. That's when the weather is best. What would you like to see happen between now and December for confidence to return to our market, our equities market?
Well, very simple. I think government, whether it's the ICI or, you know, the Department of Justice or something, they should prosecute because, you know, to everybody's perception, there seems to be a lot of evidence there going up against certain people. Certain people have admitted wrongdoings already. Let's start with that, and then we go up the food chain, if you'd like.
Okay, let's talk about interest rates quickly. The BSP surprised markets with a rate cut this October, earlier than most had expected. The Monetary Board meets in December with the slowdown brought about by the corruption scandal, the curtailing of government spending. Do you think we're going to see another 25 bips rate cut this December?
I'll say that yes. They, you know, we see BSP cutting rates again. They will caution that with you know, how inflation turns out. You know how, you know, in the coming months. So they'll temper things. If maybe if it stays within their range, they have headroom to cut rates.
Okay.
And that's really setting up for 2026.
Right. They need to prop up growth for 2026. All right. Let's talk about one more thing. The last bastion of hope possibly for the year, Maynilad's IPO, this major utility firm. Maynilad just slashed its offer price to 15 pesos after bringing in cornerstone investors like the IFC and the ADB. What does that tell you about current investor appetite? And what does that say to other companies planning to raise money?
Sure. Two things. 15 is now the cap. I think they will, if I recall right, Maynilad will send their final offer price today. We hope it'll be lower than 15. Two reasons. One, it establishes a share price that becomes very attractive from a dividend yield perspective. I'd say even better than the dividend yield you get right now on a lot of the listed REITs. So it becomes interesting on that part. Forget capital gains, dividend yield, people will go for that. What else? Maynilad, they are the biggest as far as the water utilities are concerned. The first also to be tagged as a green equity
That's right.
security by the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Very interesting stock. It's just turbulent times. I want to move on. I've got two more questions, and we're really tight on time. Today, over 30 of the country's top business groups released a joint statement for decisive actions against what they're calling unprecedented corruption. What are your thoughts on this call to the government?
Well, government really has to listen. The business sector is a sector that government should pay attention to. Call it maybe an elitist group, but it is a lead group, and government shouldn't, say, well, that's just businessmen being businessmen.
They need to listen to the taxpayers, period.
Sure.
Okay, Manny, just lastly, outlook. At this trajectory, we're hovering at about 6,000. If, say, we see some accountability, and some confidence is restored, where might that recovery take the PSC index? And if nothing happens, will we be stuck at this level? Will we be finishing off the year at this level?
Yeah, well, bad news first. So nothing happens. That scenario, which, unfortunately is a real scenario. Yeah, we pretty much stay where we are in the doldrums. So currently about 5,900, 6,000 levels. You see positive action, definitive action being taken. We should recover to 6,500. So good upside.
Hoping for that upside. Yes. Thank you so much, Mr. Ocampo. Manny, for your time this morning.
Thank you.
All right, in other news, the French police are investigating a daring heist at Paris's Louvre Museum. Thieves broke in using a crane, smashed an upstairs window, and stole priceless jewelry from an era that houses the French crown jewels. They escaped on board motorcycles. Museum officials had already sounded the alarm about lack of an investment on security at the world-famous site that houses artwork such as the Mona Lisa. Now, the family of Mango founder Isaac Andic says it's fully cooperating with authorities following reports that his son, Jonathan Andic, is being treated as a suspect in his father's death. Local media in Spain say investigators flagged contradictory statements from Jonathan 10 months after his father died from a fall while hiking with family members in the Montserrat caves near Barcelona. The Istanbul-born businessman moved to Catalonia in the 1960s and founded Mango in 1984. At the time of his death, he was non-executive chairman of the global fashion brand and had a net worth of $4.5 billion, according to Forbes. Now, a cargo plane that came from Dubai skidded off the runway into the sea while landing at Hong Kong International Airport today. Local media reports at least 2 people died. Emergency personnel rushed to the Boeing 747 cargo aircraft, which was partially submerged near the airport's seawall. The 4 crew members were rescued. 2 people who were inside a ground vehicle near the runway that was suspected to have been struck by the aircraft have died. The northern runway has been closed, but the south and central runways will continue to operate. And before we end the show, we want to show you 2 photos shared with us by concerned citizens. first photo was taken shortly after the protest rally outside Forbes Park Village, where the property of former Speaker Martin Romualdez is located. The Green Gate had already been elevated, a response, some say, to that demonstration, which targeted Romualdez and fellow lawmaker Zaldi Ko over alleged flood control kickbacks. The house, still under construction, is intended to be the primary residence of Martin Romualdez and his wife, Tigong Party List Representative Yeda. In this more recent image, that view has changed even further. The gate is now fully hidden behind fresh landscaping. The entire front completely hidden from view. Some say it's just privacy, but in a country where power fears exposure, every wall tells a story. So we ask, are they shielding their home or covering their tracks? And that's it for Business 360. I'm Maiki Oreta. Thank you for joining us, and keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.